Have you ever wondered how far mourning can go? How about a last meal with the departed, literally? Welcome to the world of endocannibalism, a practice that might seem straight out of a horror film, but for the Melanesians of Papua New Guinea and the Wari people of Brazil, it was once a part of their mourning rituals. Endocannibalism, as the term suggests, involves the consumption of the deceased's flesh by their own kin. It's a concept that can be hard to stomach, especially for those of us accustomed to conventional burial and cremation practices. But let's transport ourselves to the world of the Melanesians and the Wari people, where this act was seen not as gruesome, but as a form of respect and commemoration. In these cultures, the physical body was not seen as an end in itself, but as a vessel for the spirit. Death was not the end of life, but rather a transition, a passage from one form of existence to another. And the consumption of the deceased's flesh was a way of honoring this transition. It allowed the departed spirit to live on, to continue to be a part of the community, even after their physical presence had come to an end. It was also a way of coping with the intense grief and loss that death brings. By consuming the deceased's flesh, the mourners were able to maintain a physical connection with their loved ones, to keep them close in a very tangible, visceral way. It was a practice that was deeply symbolic, deeply emotional, and deeply human, despite its macabre nature. And so, as we delve deeper into the world of the Melanesians and the Wari people, we see that endocannibalism, far from being a horrifying act, was a way of dealing with the universal human experience of death. It was a way of keeping the memory of the deceased alive, of honoring their spirit, and of dealing with the pain of loss. As gruesome as it may seem to us, to them it was an act of respect and a way to keep the deceased spirit alive among the living. From consuming the dead to feeding them to the animals, burial rituals can indeed be wild. Picture this, the vast, rugged landscape of Tibet, where the final resting place for many isn't beneath the ground but high in the sky. Yes, we're talking about the Tibetan sky burials, a practice that seems gruesome to the uninitiated, yet holds profound spiritual significance. Here, the bodies of the deceased are chopped into pieces and offered to wild animals, particularly birds of prey. It's not a morbid disposal, but a generous act of charity, an embodiment of the Buddhist belief in the transience of life and the transformation of death into a final act of giving. Respect for the dead takes on a different form, where the departure of a life nourishes the living, echoing the enduring cycle of life and death. In the grand scheme of life and death, these rituals remind us that we are all part of a larger cycle. What if coffins didn't rest in the ground, but hung from cliffs instead? Imagine stepping into the remote Hempon Valley of southwest China, where an eerie silence is broken only by the lapping of the crab stream nearly 300 feet below. There, high above your head, you'd find an unusual sight: coffins suspended from the cliff face. This is the haunting legacy of the Bo people, an ancient civilization that vanished over 4 centuries ago. The Bo people held a unique view of death and the afterlife, believing that suspending the deceased between heaven and earth would bless their souls. But these aren't just any coffins. They're intricately carved wooden marvels, showcasing the Bo's skilled craftsmanship. Some are even shaped like boats, symbolizing a spiritual journey from this life to the next. The location of these coffins is no accident. The Bo chose these cliffs for a reason. They believed the higher the coffin, the more respect was shown to the departed, providing them with a closer connection to the divine. Moreover, the sheer cliff face offered natural protection against animals and grave robbers, ensuring the peace of the departed. But the Bo people didn't just leave coffins in their wake. They also left behind mysterious murals painted on the cliff face that narrate tales of their long-lost civilization. These murals depict scenes of hunting, farming, and warfare, providing us with a glimpse into their daily lives and societal structure. However, the meanings of these murals and the reason for their co-location with the coffins remain an enigma. The Bo people, their cliffside coffins, and their cryptic murals have fascinated archaeologists and historians for years. Despite the progress made in understanding this ancient civilization, many questions remain. Why did they choose such a labor-intensive and perilous burial method? What do the murals tell us about their beliefs and rituals? These hanging coffins, left by a long-lost civilization, continue to mystify us, leaving us with more questions than answers. Can love and devotion push someone to walk into the flames? This question brings us to the ritual of sati, a practice from a bygone era in India. It involved a widowed woman voluntarily, or sometimes involuntarily, immolating herself on her husband's funeral pyre. While the origins of sati are shrouded in the mists of time, historical records suggest that it was a practice deeply entrenched in societal norms and religious beliefs. The motives behind sati were complex and multifaceted. On the one hand, it was seen as an act of ultimate devotion and loyalty, a final farewell that united the wife with her deceased husband in death. However, the darker side of sati can't be ignored. Many instances of this ritual were not voluntary but coerced, with societal pressure and fear playing significant roles. This disturbing practice wasn't exclusive to India. In fact, similar customs were found in other ancient societies. The Egyptians, Greeks, Goths, and Scythians all had their versions of widow sacrifice. In these cultures, the practice was often linked to notions of honor, duty, and religious obligation. But as with sati, the line between voluntary devotion and forced coercion was often blurred, leading to a disturbing mix of love, fear, and compulsion. The ritual of sati has long been abolished and is now considered a dark chapter in human history. It has left an indelible mark on society, raising questions about the ways we mourn the dead and the extremes of human behavior in the face of loss and grief. The practice of sati, along with its counterparts in other societies, provides a stark reminder of the power of cultural and societal norms in shaping our actions, particularly in relation to death and mourning. It forces us to confront the lengths to which people have gone, driven by devotion or coercion, to honor the dead and adhere to societal expectations. Sati, a ritual mired in controversy, remains a dark reminder of the extreme lengths some societies once went to honor the dead. Imagine a funeral that involves a burning ship, a slave girl, and a Viking nobleman. Welcome to the chillingly fascinating world of Viking funerals. As depicted by Ahmad ibn Fadlan, a 10th century Arab Muslim writer, the departure of a Viking chieftain was a spectacle of fire, lust, and sacrifice. The ship, a symbol of the Vikings' wanderlust and exploration, was set ablaze, carrying the nobleman to his final voyage. But it wasn't just the chieftain who embarked on this journey. A slave girl, chosen to serve her master in the afterlife, was subjected to a ritual of sex and sacrifice. This grim tableau of death was a testament to the Vikings' belief in life after death and the continuity of service, even beyond the mortal realm. These elements, intertwined in a macabre dance, painted a vivid picture of the Vikings' approach to death and the afterlife. In the harsh world of the Vikings, death involved fire, sacrifice, and an unforgettable journey to the afterlife. How much pain would you endure to remember a loved one? This question was a stark reality for the Dani people of West Papua New Guinea, who practiced a ritual that involved the amputation of fingers. This was more than just a symbolic gesture. It was a physical manifestation of loss and mourning. When a loved one passed away, close relatives, particularly women, would sever one of their fingers. This act was seen as an expression of sorrow and grief, a visceral tribute to the departed. The amputated digit was often burned, and the ashes buried with the deceased, a poignant indicator of the bond between the living and the dead. The ritual also served a protective function. It was believed that the physical pain would appease the spirits, keeping them satisfied and preventing them from bringing harm to the family. While this tradition has faded, the memory of it lives on in the hands of the older generations. What if death was not the end, but just another reason to dance? In the highlands of Madagascar, the Merina tribe celebrates death in a way that's perhaps unmatched in its exuberance. Known as Famadihana, or the turning of the bones, this ritual breathes life into the concept of death. Every 7 years, families gather to exhume the remains of their loved ones, wrapped in shrouds. These shrouds are then replaced with fresh silk cloths in an act of respect and love for the deceased. But this is no somber affair. Accompanied by music and dancing, the living joyously carry the remains of their ancestors around the tomb before laying them to rest again. This intimate and lively celebration serves as a reminder that in Madagascar, death is not a final goodbye. It's a continuing bond between the living and the dead. In a world filled with diverse cultures, death is not just a dark end, but can also be a vibrant celebration of life.